In traditional mid-range and control strategies in Magic the Gathering, card advantage is an extremely important concept. If you're able to pull ahead by one card and then exchange every other resource perfectly with your opponent, you can win with a single unanswered threat. For this reason, decks that play to a resource advantage, often called fair decks, don't have the luxury to include cards that put them down in resources unless there's something massive to be gained from it. Contrary to fair decks though, Magic has a lot of unfair decks that use powerful card synergies that rely much less on card quantity. One of the most historically powerful unfair deck enablers was a card called Faithless Looting, which puts you down a card in hand for the ability to inexpensively discard cards with graveyard synergies while giving lots of card selection. An example of a deck that abuses this is Dredge, which intends to flip the majority of its deck into the graveyard and overwhelm the opponent with creatures like Prized Amalgams before killing them with a Conflagrate. However, due to looting putting you down a resource, fair decks didn't consider playing it for the longest time. However, a deck called Mardu Pyromancer broke this rule by turning Faithless Looting into a card that generates a resource advantage. This deck plays efficient hand hate and removal spells like Thoughtseize and Lightning Bolts to keep up with high-pace aggressive decks and also generate value with Young Pyromancer, which can get out of hand both on offense and defense if unanswered. But how does looting fit in? The most obvious looting synergy is with Lingering Souls. The front half of Souls is pretty below rate and can be too expensive to cast without falling far behind. Putting Lingering Souls in the graveyard in exchange for a more efficient card like Lightning Bolt is almost always worth it. The card is also made stronger by Young Pyromancer, as small creatures get much better in large numbers as they can combine to block larger creatures. Faithless Looting also helps accelerate to Bedlam Reveler, which is a great reload for this deck given it plays so much instant and sorcery interaction. Not only is Reveler a 4-for-1, but it also dodges all of the conditional removal in the format, meaning it can consistently stick to the board and close the game very quickly. Despite not being in the deck name, this is definitely the most important card in the deck. Faithless Looting's flashback ability is also very appreciated by this deck, as it could hold lands in hand to discard for spells in the late game, as this deck could operate on just 4 or 5 lands at all points in the game. Between the two halves of the card, along with their abilities to discard useless cards like Fatal Push against Control or Blood Moon against decks that are resilient to it, looting more than made up for the card it lost. Mardu Pyromancer first popped up in early 2017, playing a more aggressive build that played Monastery Swift Spears and more red removal that could go face over Fatal Pushes. In 2018, when Grixis Shadow and 5-color Humans were the two most played decks in the format, Mardu cut the aggressive plan for Fatal Pushes and more hard removal, and was firmly tier 1 due to its incredible matchups versus these decks. Shadow is very weak to Thoughtseize and creature tokens in general, as if they didn't find a way to trample over the tokens, one token could be thrown in front of a massive Death Shadow or Gurmag Angler at a time, while the Shadow player can be killed on the counterswing by a ton of creatures very quickly. Humans had a really hard time against decks with a ton of removal. The deck had Cavern of Souls and Aether Vial to blank counterspells, and Kitesail Freebooter and Meddling Mage were both very good versus decks playing only around 4 removal spells, but Mardu played around 15 mainboard kill spells spanning over 5 different names, meaning Meddling Mage and Kitesail Freebooter usually hit one removal spell and then died to another. Mardu struggled the most against unfair Faithless Looting decks, as the deck was forced to play weaker graveyard hate spells like Leyline of the Void over Rest in Peace, as the latter shut down Mardu's own engine as well. Big mana decks also posed large problems for Mardu since the deck simply didn't kill opponents very quickly, and decks like Tron and Scapeshift are super strong after setting up for the first 2 or 3 turns. With the uptick of KCI Combo, a horrible matchup for Mardu, as well as a bunch of big mana decks played to contest the new Blue-Red Phoenix, Mardu fell out of favor in late 2018. Faithless Looting was banned in August of 2019 as it enabled too many decks and made its way into some of the most powerful strategies in Modern's history. Let me know what you want to see next.